Welcome to My Fellow Montanans. I am Dr. Kyle Austin, owner of Farm 406. My Fellow Montanans is a statewide weekly broadcast on topics ranging from business to agriculture and from health to politics and anything in between. You can follow My Fellow Montanans on youtube.com at My Fellow Montanans. You can listen at 94.7 FM or the Mighty 790 AM or listen live anywhere in the world at mighty790.com. And today we got a guest on our show. Former Congressman Denny R is joining My Fellow Montanans for a second time. Denny, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. We can cover every topic you talked about, whether it's health, because that was kind of what I did in the legislature and in Congress. I was on taxation and appropriations. And so any topic is on the table.
Well, let's just kind of talk about, because right now is vaccine season, and I got a lot of people coming into Farm 406 because Farm 406 is a vaccination destination no matter what vaccine you pretty much want. But Kennedy has really stirred the pot politically, but also for people's health. And so I get a lot of people and they're confused on what's going on because you got Kennedy with his personal beliefs out there. And then you got the health departments fighting him. And then you got the pediatricians and the doctors fighting him. What's kind of your take on what Kennedy's done for the Republicans? Has he hurt the Republicans? Is he doing the Republicans justice? What's your thought on that?
Well, you never really know whether it's helping or hurting until the next election. And, I've served in everything you could possibly think of. My first session at the Montana legislature, it was split 50-50 in the House. And so the speakership went to whoever was governor. Well, it was Schwinden at the time. So we had a Democrat speaker, but then we had to pick and choose. So we took appropriations, they took taxation on down the line. And we stuck together enough that we won the majority the next time. But then people got a little crazy. They were in the majority. You never knew whether the message was getting through to the voters around Montana. And we lost the majority. We went into the minority at the state legislature. Well, I see the same thing happening. Does Trump help the party or hurt the party? Does stepping across the line to pick somebody like Kennedy to be the secretary or not? It's interesting because he comes from a Democrat family, but Trump had enough confidence in him to appoint him to that position. But I get a little tired of having to defend the president because, I'm with him about 80 or 90 or 95%, but every once in a while he does something. And I don't know whether this new thing with Tylenol is going to help or hurt. I know it's got the OBGYNs around the country and the state of Montana and Billings upset. But I'm not an expert in that kind of thing. So I don't know.
I think, obviously a lot of the Republicans out there, they appreciate what President Donald Trump's doing for America and doing for Montanans. But when you get into like his appointed person, JFK Kennedy, what he's doing with the CDC, I believe Trump was trying to pull some of the Democrats, that are maybe middle of the road over to voting Republican and helping the Republicans out by putting Kennedy in there. But what Kennedy's doing is he's throwing a lot of fake news out there because when he first came in, he's sitting there blaming vaccines for autism. And so what did the medical community do? They challenged him on it and said, prove it. And he can't prove it. And then he comes out and he wants to put these restrictions on COVID vaccines, which they did at the beginning of the pandemic. And I saw that coming where they started where it was 65 and older. And then if you're under 65 and you had a pre-existing condition, you can get the COVID shot. And you and I had this conversation one day and I said, what they should have done was play it safe and just said, look, it's a decision between you and your provider. And if you decide you want the COVID vaccine, it's optional.
Right.
Leave it optional, no matter what your beliefs are. Well, now last week, they actually released it now where COVID vaccine, if you decide it's between you and your provider, if you decide it's in your best interest and you want it, you can get it. And that should have been the approach from the beginning from Kennedy. But he really stirred the pot and confused the general population because at the end of the day, the general population, I mean, they're smart, but they get confused easily and it causes a very big uproar.
Well, that's why your program is very important because where do we go anymore to get our information? There's so many sources out there. That is it ABC, NBC, and MSNBC, or is it CNN or Fox News? And we have a tendency to divvy into corners, and that's what creates the problem. But the president needs to recognize or realize, as does RFK, that they have the bully pulpit, and what they say is um, like a foghorn.
But it's backfiring. It's backfiring because then he goes in. I think he was dumb enough where he goes into this Tylenol thing that you brought up,
Yeah,
saying Tylenol now is the cause of all autism, and everyone's out there used Tylenol. It's been used for hundreds of years,
yeah.
and it's used very widely today in pregnant women, even in children.
Hmm.
But they can't prove it, and that's where he
Yeah.
came out saying, "Oh, it causes autism," and now the medical professions are like, "Prove it."
Well, and the problem is he stands behind a podium. He's got charts and such. But again, I go back to the point that he's got the pulpit, so it's widely circulated and talked about, and so he's got to be very careful. But you know, remember, he's a lame duck. He can't run for reelection, and so what you're seeing from his appointees and himself is he's able to get away from the party politics. And sometimes the party agrees, and other times the medical profession doesn't. You never know. And
Right.
so we'll find out during the midterms.
Well, and I'm really shocked or surprised that Trump hasn't came out and kind of put, kind of put his foot down on him, because I feel that he is hurting the Republican Party. And where we're talking about that pendulum swinging, Republicans right now on a federal level, they have the majority.
Mhm.
At the state of Montana level, they've had the majority. And we've seen that pendulum over history swing. And it's because I don't know if it's an ego thing or whatnot, but it angers the voters.
Well, that's what happened with the legislature in 1987 when I was there. We had the majority, and frankly, we did and said a lot of things, and people started peeling off, and we lost the majority. And so, the Speaker of the U.S. House, that's a tough job right now because it's almost 50-50, and whether the uh, secretaries of the various departments have that much influence, we don't know. But they've got to be careful because if knowing that he's a lame duck and he can't run for reelection, people will get very emotional on one side or another. And there again, that's why your program is so important because, and you are as well, because I come to you for advice. You can get into your computer and tell me exactly when I took the last shot and such, and that's key. That's where we get our information. But people are confused right now because there's so much going on in social media, and we're kind of losing connection. And COVID was a real problem for us in Montana because a lot of people didn't have access to the internet. I was down on the reservation at the Crow, down at Launchgrass. They did not have access, and so their kids are at home. And how do they educate their children? And so the COVID was a problem. Now we've got AI coming in, and we have to pay attention to that. And it's going to be an interesting ride because society has gotten a lot more complex because of the internet. It's got advantages and disadvantages, and we have to be careful in any one of these issues whether we're getting our information the right way from the right person and trust their opinion.
Well, we're talking about information because there's this huge thing, the last election about fake news. I think this was in the last president, or was it in Trump's first term? There was a huge thing about fake news.
Yeah.
What was real, what was fake. And then we got AI now, which you can Google an AI. I mean, how do you know if it's correct and what source it's getting its information from? But also, what I have a problem with is social media, where everybody is able to put their 2 cents in.
Yeah.
And so when you got everybody putting their 2 cents in, and they just go off on these big tangents, and people read that and they actually fall into it. And then they come into me and they're like, "Well, I read this on the internet." And I look at them, "Where did you get your information?" "Oh, I saw a comment on Facebook."
Yeah.
It maybe our society or our government should rein in on, it does affect First Amendment rights by tampering with freedom of speech, but I really think they need to hone in on what happens on the internet. I've never
Well,
seen any, and I really feel like maybe there should be an internet accountability act.
yeah, but who's going to be in charge of that? See, I have a real problem with the government getting involved in things like that just because of the freedom of speech. Yeah, there are kooks, but some of them are our kooks, and some of them are theirs.
Well, the
And
government's
but who's to
there.
decide? I mean, because do we really want the government to be the referee, setting up some kind of a commission? And the difficulty is, we have a tendency to believe that Fox is on all the time, and that message is getting through. But you got to remember, Fox News is up against MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, and such. And so it's almost 6 or 7 to 1. So if the government is controlled by message, there's a lot of people out there that are getting the opposite message from what they hear on your program or Fox News.
Well, and that's what, so the government, I look at the government, they should only be there to protect the people. And so if there's a bunch of misinformation out there and they have a Internet Accountability Act and someone's out there putting false information that they can't support,
Mhm.
it's more than an opinion. So then that's where I feel the government should come in and say, look, you can't be putting your garbage out there because one, it's not an opinion and it's non-factual.
Mhm.
And we have to protect one, the kids in school that's reading this stuff, but also the general consumer that's not smart enough to tell what's right and wrong.
Well, once again, whose job is it to decide what's right or wrong? I mean, we have to have the ability. And I made a promise when I became lieutenant governor that I'd be in all 56 counties every year, and I was able to fulfill that as lieutenant governor and as a congressman. And I would do kind of what Charlie Kirk did, was have open houses. Come on down, Republican, Democrat, Independent. I don't care. Come on down to my town hall meeting when I'm up in Shoto, or I'm over in Bainville or something like that. And that's where you can get the information out. And that's why it's important to have access to information rather than the government deciding. Because if you remember COVID, that was coming from the last administration. Uh, did they make all the right decisions? Well, the pendulum swung to the other side. And now we're hearing a different opinion. So I really have a problem with the government being involved in trying to control message.
So you brought up Charlie Kirk, and that's been in the news quite a bit lately. And a couple episodes ago, a few weeks ago, I talked about not really Charlie Kirk, but kind of the message out there: don't shoot me, debate me.
Mhm.
Because we've shifted in our society where we should be able to have open conversation. We should be able to debate and walk away still friends.
Mhm.
But what do you think's happened over the years that's created the hostile environment in America where people cannot debate and they can't tolerate opposite opinions, and it creates the riots, it creates these shootings? What do you think the reason is that? Where did that come from?
Well, one of the things that changed was politics has become very competitive. And if you remember that the Democrats had total control of Congress for 40 years. Well, Newt Gingrich came along with the contract with America, and people realized that there was a silent majority out there, and the voice was heard. The majority changed, and then that created a competitiveness. So the Republicans beat up the Democrats beat up the Republicans, the independents are sitting out in the middle trying to figure out which way to go. And politics has just changed. It's more competitive than it used to be. But I'm glad that it wasn't one party rule for 40 years, unless, of course, it was our party. But that's where it has changed.
Right. And you look at history, it's not just the Democrats that's causing violence over the politics. Like you said, politics have become more aggressive. Um, but it's not just the Democrats that are out there shooting Republicans.
Yep.
There's Republicans shooting Democrats. It's going both ways. But, really, where did I guess you go back even further into history, there's always been shootings and assassinations,
Mhm.
but it seems like it's getting worse.
Well, you hear it more because of 24-hour news. And so something happens in Georgia, and it's all over the nation within minutes through the internet. Now, do you want to control the internet? No, because there's always a good side of change, like the internet, and there's also bad side. Hey, keep in mind that as a society, we've come a long ways. Do you really want to go back to the day where you didn't have a cell phone? You kind of do, but that's not true. We like the access that change has given us. And that's why AI is going to be interesting, because it's another one of those major changes within our society. It can be good, it can be bad. You got to remember that you look at Charlie. He believed in faith, but the devil hasn't given up either. It's always out there. So it's you win some, you lose some, or garbage in and garbage out. You never know. But again, um, we're looking forward to some of the changes of AI, but there's also going to be some problems.
How do you think AI can prevent violence or teach people to be anti-violent?
It can't. Um, uh, you always have to remember that we have the best government in the world. And I've traveled the world because I was on foreign ops appropriations. And so I've been in Africa and Australia and England and Ireland and you name it, Samoa, Guam. And everybody wants what America has. And we've got a great system here. Let's not screw it up. So try and keep the judiciary and the judges and the lawyers in one little arena. Let the legislators legislate. Let the president and the executive branch and the governor do what the executive branch does. And let's understand that we still have the best system in the world. People want to come to America because of what we have.
Well, we do have freedom and stuff out there, but as far as preventing violence, you talk to the attorneys and you talk to the judges, and I don't agree with the attorneys and the judges. I think every time I turn around and they're sentencing these people to 75 years in prison,
Mhm.
I feel like they're just making a pet of society and a burden on taxpayers like you and I. And so I feel like our criminal justice system is broken because they feel like we have the best criminal justice system in the world, but yet our violence keeps escalating as our population increases. And so I kind of feel like our criminal justice system doesn't work because I don't think there's enough fear out there. And I feel like for people to fall in line and behave, there has to be some fear.
But whose fault is that? Um, the legislative branch has created laws that lets things like that happen. And so, as long as we as voters and citizens pay attention to what our government is doing at the mayoral level, the county commission, state legislature, the governor, and then you get up to the look at the judiciary. You've got many different layers and levels. But ultimately, the legislature or Congress establishes the laws, but they're not specific. And so it's up to us to pay attention. If we don't like what the trial lawyers are doing, then vote certain people into the Montana Supreme Court, or make sure that the Trump administration makes the right appointments to the federal judiciary. We can't take that away. So again, you can't legislate against violence. It just doesn't happen.
Well, what I'm getting to is like the legislators create the laws that make people criminals, but they have the penalties in there that the judges can execute. So
Mhm.
up to 75 years in prison, up to $10,000 in fines, that doesn't scare people anymore. And so it has the pendulum swung in our society that it doesn't fear people from prevent them from committing crimes.
Well,
And so do we need to look at alternatives out there, maybe where we go back 100 years where capital punishment, public lashings, hangings? I mean, do we need to go back to that society that we shifted away from?
we can't. We're not going back. And we just have to realize that we have to go forward. And so, yes, Charlie Kirk was a message that was heard around the world, and it's unfortunate that happened to him. And God bless he and his family for what they've been through. However, um, is that enough to change the minds of people, to make sure the judiciary is right or the state legislature is right? And that's why we just have to trust uh, the programs that we listen to, whether it's yours or Fox News or CNN.
Well, I mean, any kind of catastrophic event like Charlie Kirk, or even if there's a war, it brings people together for a short period of time.
Yep.
And so we've seen a lot of people come out of the woodworks and come together. And yeah, you got some radicals out there that are like, they don't care, but they're morons anyway. But it brings people together. But the end point is, our society shifted away from parents spanking their kids. And I get a lot of get people in here. It's like, no, to correct society and get your kids back on track, parents should legally be able to spank your kids at home or in public. What do you think about bringing back legalized spankings?
Hadn't really thought about that much. But, you know, again, we're not going back. And so we just have to realize that moving forward, things have changed. And does the Charlie Kirk assassination change enough minds that people will start controlling their emotions? Because uh, we have created a pitch of emotion that sometimes works for us and sometimes works against. I was in Congress, a newly freshman congressman in September 11th, and there were the passion of the electorate at the time said, "Do something. We don't want this to happen again." And what did we end up? The passions kind of went away, but the Congress went and passed things like the Patriot Act and some of the other things that have come back to bite us. And so we always have to remember that control our emotions. It doesn't have to be the extremes. Pay attention to what's going on. And September 11th was a good example to me because I got on the aviation committee for a reason. I wanted to try and improve transportation in Montana, whether air or rail. And because of September 11th, I spent 4 years having to deal on the on the Transportation Committee, Aviation Subcommittee, with aviation security. And that gave us TSA. Are we happy about that? Well, maybe it went too far. But the emotion of the day created the Congress that passed a lot of things that we look back and the public has moved on. They're not as emotional about September 11th as they were. And there's other things that are happening in society that they're not as passionate about. But we have to be careful because when these major events happen, the emotion is to go in and do something from a governmental standpoint that may not be as good when you look back 10
Have you heard
years.
of the government moving in any direction or trying to create some bills related to Charlie Kirk's incident?
I have not because everybody's focused on whether the government's going to shut down or not. And I went through many of those debates and votes when I was in Congress. We always had the threat of government shutting down. And when the Republicans were in the majority, they swung one way, but the Senate is the saucer that cools the emotion of the nation. So you need 60 votes to pass something. So what's Chuck Schumer doing? He's an obstructionist right now. He does not want to sit at the table and try and come up with something reasonable because he's in the minority, but
Well, right now the
we don't have
minority
60.
has the power though, because what I was seeing is for the Republicans to get the 60 votes to keep the government open, they have to shift 7 Democrats to the 60 votes to get the government to stay open. And that's where Chuck Schumer, he's like, we finally have some power here, and we have a little of what do you want to call it? Uh, Bait, or to where they can negotiate. They can sit down at the table and really push the Republicans now to swing back the pendulum their way and give them something back that they want.
Okay, go back under your argument earlier than 100 years ago. The founding fathers weren't stupid. They created a situation where the minority still had rights and a voice. And we as Republicans, when we were in the minority at the U.S. Senate, we used it to try and get the Democrats to be a little bit more reasonable our way. And so, again, the pendulum switches back and forth. Chuck Schumer is doing his job, and that is he's an obstructionist. We don't like it, but we don't have 60 votes. And so we're doing okay in Montana because we have 2 Republican U.S. senators. Uh, but tell that to California that they should switch, or Washington, or Rhode Island, or Connecticut. That's up to the states to decide who they send to Congress. So if they don't like the job the senators are doing, then they have the ability at voting time, like we did with John Tester, to defeat him and elect Tim Sheehy. And so minority have rights within our Constitution, and that's not all bad. Our founding fathers were pretty smart about this.
Yeah, so I mean, it does balance and it does shift back and forth like that. But what happens, we got to take a break here. But when we come back, I want to talk about if a government shutdown is actually beneficial to America, if we should do that. So, my fellow Montanans, we are here with former Congressman Denny Rehberg. And after this break, we're going to talk more about government shutdown. Welcome back to my fellow Montanans, and we are here with former Congressman Denny Rehberg talking about government shutdowns. Denny, let's see, before the break, we were talking about whether a government shutdown would be beneficial because we always get the drama between the Republicans and the Democrats of, oh, we don't want to shut down. Shutting down the government's a bad thing. And the important stuff doesn't shut down. It's usually the unimportant stuff that gets shut down. And I always look at it as like, maybe our government should shut down for 30 days and let people reset, let people think about it and kick the dust up a little bit. What's your take on being a former congressman if the government did shut down for about 30 days?
It can't. Do you want our service people around the world and in the nation, those in the Air Force, Army, Marine,
Well,
Coast
that's
Guard,
the one sector
well,
that doesn't shut down, though. When the government shuts down, the military and the defense stay active. The executive branch stays active. Congress and the senators stay active. But what really shuts down is the what do you want? The little guys, the Treasury Department, the
but think about it. I got a lot of pressure from Montanans during the shutdown debates when I was in Congress because guess who wasn't going to get their CRP payments? Farmers in Montana. You had other small businesses that had
because the USDA would shut down. They would be they're essential.
Right.
They're non-essential.
But they're essential to Montana farmers.
Well, twice a year when they get the checks.
Well,
so timing could be,
but it's
taken into a
but
play.
it's so disruptive that it takes government a while to get over the fight and get back to normal. And again, I've served in every kind of Congress and legislature that you can think of. And one of the things I never looked forward to was the changing of administration from one party to the next because everybody got thrown out, and it gives the bureaucrats an opportunity to not do anything. And therein lies the problem when we have this growing bureaucracy in the country that are not doing anything. It takes a while for them to start doing again. And government shutdowns don't serve a purpose, really.
Now, the Republicans have always campaigned on their platforms on paying off the national debt. And we've seen Trump try to pay off the national debt. But what we've seen is instead of the debt going down, it's still going up.
Yes.
So if the government were to shut down from a taxpayer standpoint or a business owner standpoint, you shut down divisions to save money. How much money roughly a day would the taxpayer save to help pay down our national debt?
Probably not enough. I can tell you from personal experience, I was in the restaurant, fast food industry, Burger Kings and Popeyes around the state. And when the government was embroiled in all this conversation, I had an SBA loan that was put on hold. Well, it cost me personally. It costs everybody. And so it doesn't save enough money. You have to try and get everybody to the table to come to some kind of agreement of how you're going to prioritize. And right now, The priority of the Congress, the House, is barely Republican. The Senate is a majority, but not 60 votes. And so, uh, you're not going to get everything you want
So
from
what's the
Congress.
holdup? What's the holdup? What do the Democrats want at, to keep the government operational? Have you heard?
Yeah, I can tell you, you can't outspend a Democrat. You'll say, I'm going to give you $10 billion. And they'll say, well, we wanted 15 billion. Okay, you can have 15. Well, we really meant we wanted 20 billion. And you can't outspend them. And so what we try and do is put the brakes. And one of the things they're talking about is some of the reduction that occurred with the big, beautiful bill and all of that. And the Democrats don't agree with that. And so they're being obstructionist from their standpoint of trying to get more money in health and human services and education. And the Republicans are trying to control the debt. But one of the things we don't talk about is the unfunded liability of pensions, both at the state level, which is required to balance his budget, but it isn't really balanced in Montana because you've got all this unfunded liability out there. And so, one of the big problems is people don't understand there is no such thing as a social security trust fund. Uh, the Congress over the years has spent the money. So as us hardworking taxpayers are putting money into social security, it's being spent on other things. And so Trump is trying to put the brakes on it, and Republicans are trying to uh, uh, lessen the debt that's going to be passed on to the next generation. But you can't outspend a Democrat in Congress. They want more money. And so, when Newt Gingrich tried to control and balance the budget, everybody said, "Oh my God, you're going to put grandma over the cliff in her wheelchair." No, they were still getting more money, but they weren't getting as much as they wanted.
Yeah, I think I think both sides. I'm going to disagree. It's not just the Democrats always wanting more money, because the Republicans always want more money for
Yep.
their agendas as well.
That's right.
And so it's a matter of, me as a taxpayer, or if I run for an office someday, it's not just about more money. It's about how can we do the job more efficiently.
Mhm.
And that's what we should be looking at. Because one of the things, there's a couple things federally that impact Montanans here that we should talk about. One is Medicare.
Mhm.
Medicare is getting aged. You look at Part A, Part B. It's still an old paper process. It's not efficient. It costs the taxpayers more money. But you got a lot of the elderly like, don't mess with my Medicare. And Trump promised us that he was going to consolidate Medicare and make it more efficient. But I haven't seen that move forward yet. And what, for the listeners out there, what he's talking about is actually shifting Medicare A and B into the Advantage plans. So Medicare is all consolidated. It's all on the private market with your Part D plan, and you have one card.
Mhm.
And I agree with that. But one of the things it kind of went, it got lost out there. Have you heard where they're at? And do you agree with that plan on making an Advantage plan out of Medicare?
I do, but there's a large group of people out there that don't agree. And so they use that issue in the competitiveness of politics that I talked about, that it doesn't matter where Trump or the administration is trying to make the fundamental changes to make it a better system. There's still the opponents that are out there going to say, well, you just want to destroy Medicare. Well, not really. We want to make it better. Medicaid, we're always going to have people on Medicaid.
Well, the problem with the people that want to keep the Medicare the way it is are the people that are cashing in on it. It's the legal corruption out there. So the people that have been making money that have the contracts for the federal government, like Noridian, people have heard of Noridian. And what happens is if you come to Farm 406 and I have to bill your medical plan through the Part B, it's a paper process. I got to sit down, do paper. And then those go to Noridian, which has the government contract on completing the claims paper. Like, they're making billions of dollars off of it. So they're advocating to say, no, don't take that away from us, because when you do, then it goes electronic and it saves the taxpayers
All right,
billions
Kyle,
of dollars.
let me be the devil's advocate. Why did you vote for Obama?
I didn't vote.
Well, you must have, because he had the majority. He won the presidency. He put Obamacare in place. Why did you let that happen? You, in essence, created the system you're arguing against right now, because Obamacare has turned healthcare over to the insurance industry.
No, that goes back to, I'm going to argue with that because we got to go back further to President Bush
Mhm.
Jr. He is the one that turned Medicare over to the private industry. He started it. He created the drug plan.
Yeah.
Before that, seniors had no drug plan. So he created the drug plan, but instead of keeping control of it in the government, he allowed it to go to the private industry and started funneling government money into the private, which now created the big issues of the PBM corruptions out there. And if we roll into the advantage plans, that's the problem I have. I like the idea of the advantage plan, but I don't like the idea of our government funneling more money into these corrupt PBMs because until we can control them.
Yeah.
And that's why we need the PBM reform that we've been pushing for. Montana was great. We were able to get House Bill 740 through where independent pharmacies can have some PBM control. But the federal level needs to have PBM reform because the state of Montana does not control Medicare or Medicaid plans.
Yep.
And so we need Congress to do PBM reform on a national level.
Well, we can look back at what President Bush did at the time, and there were many things that occurred during the Bush administration that I didn't agree with. And one of the biggest problem was we had a drought going on then, and he had a Secretary of Agriculture who was the wife of somebody in California that didn't know anything about Montana and didn't know what we were going through with the drought and opening up CRP properties for grazing and such. So I'm out there fighting the Department of Agriculture, my own president, because he was wrong. And many things happened in the Obama administration I didn't agree with. Obamacare was one of them because I didn't agree with the major change. But keep in mind, Obamacare would not have passed if the minority had an opportunity. But at that time, he had 60 votes in the Senate. He had the controlling interest. So he was able to pass something that we look back and say, this is not a good thing that occurred.
Well, the problem with Obamacare was the Affordable Care Act. And this is how you can't believe a politician because they sold it to America that it was an Affordable Care Act.
Yep.
It was it was sold as, hey, this is like a health care for all type of a thing. This is better for everybody. And so everyone bought into it. They were sold that this was best for Americans.
Yep.
And John Tester was part of it. And I was a college kid and I had a plan. I paid, it was $150 a month premium, and my deductible was $1,500 a year. That's what it was before Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. After that year, when Obamacare went into effect, my premium jumped to $300 a month, and my deductible jumped to $3,000 a month. And I'm still a young 25-year-old kid, healthy and young. So I wrote a letter to Senator John Tester's office. And I said, hey, John, these are the numbers. Where is the affordable health care? And I actually got a response from Senator John Tester.
Well, let me ask you this question. Why did you vote for Max Baucus?
Well, I wasn't even old enough to vote for Max Baucus.
Okay, keep in mind that Max was the sponsor of Obamacare, and his chief of staff was Jim Messina, who's from Montana. Well, most of the people that were working on Obamacare, I got a phone call as a congressman from the chief of staff of Max Baucus. So, neener, we win, you lose. I go, well, I don't think this is a victory for the people of Montana and America to do this. But our own senator, who was elected, was the sponsor of Obamacare in the Senate.
Yeah. So like we talked about pendulum switching. So we had Obamacare come out. A lot of people actually could afford health care prior to the Affordable Care Act,
right,
before Obamacare. And so after that, people couldn't afford the new premiums. So they were looking for jobs to pay for it. And then business owners like, I can't afford that. So then we saw the pendulum shift to where employers weren't offering health insurance no more. Then we saw the shift to where then we had to expand Medicaid. And then Medicaid expansion came out because people were uninsured. They're going to emergency rooms. They can't afford it. And so the taxpayers had to now expand Medicaid.
Yep.
And that's where we're at today. We're trying to battle over Medicaid expansion for that group of people that are caught right in the middle, of the cookie jar, where they can't afford it and can't afford it.
Well, let's go back to my own personal history. I could have stayed in government. I was unopposed in my last session, but I chose to try and take Max out, and so I ran against Bacchus. Uh, uh, you know, and I lost. And the reason I ran against John Tester was for the same reason. I gave up a safe congressional seat. I could probably still be there, uh, but I didn't want to. It was up or out, try and make a difference. And so I was willing to put myself up against John Tester just to show Montanans that there was a difference of opinion. Um, it didn't always have to be the way it was. And so that's why I admire you running for Congress, because you were, way out there. It was going to be very difficult for you to win. I gave up a safe congressional seat to try and make a difference, and you take time away from your pharmacy to try and make a difference.
Well, in a lot, if I really want to win, when someone's out there running for a race, if they really want to win, you can tell they really want to win. Where I win running for Congress is getting a voice.
Yeah.
I get the podium in a lot of small communities. I get to meet a lot of people, and I get to talk about things that happen to everyone's healthcare in Montana. Hey, this is the reason our healthcare sucks. It's because it's the insurance companies that you have, it's the PBMs, and this is how it affects the healthcare you receive. Mm-hmm. If you want better healthcare, we need PBM reform. If you want better healthcare, we need the insurance companies to pay the providers. And that way you can increase your access. And so getting out and talking to people around Montana, it's my way of telling Montanans, hey, I care about you. I'm supporting you. And this is what we have to do. And that's really why I've been running for Congress. Now, someday I do have the goal. I do want to be, governor of the state of Montana. It's not for the money. It's because that's my dream. And after that, I'm going to retire and become a fisherman or something like that, Denny. But
it doesn't work that way. I'm turning 70 this week,
and you're still engaged.
And I'm still engaged, and I'm still working. I've got a subdivision on top of the rims that I'm trying to develop. At the same time, I'm going out and killing prairie dogs tomorrow on the ranch. When you own a ranch, you never really get to retire because you still have things you have to do. And I'm spraying weeds at 70, and I'm killing prairie dogs at 70. You can't really get out. But see, you got to expand beyond healthcare. Keep in mind that when you're running for Congress, you're going to be a part of the Department of Defense, and you're going to be a part of Treasury, and you got to be an all around. And that was what I found interesting, fun, and hard as a congressman, because I had the second largest congressional district in the nation and the most population, almost double of any other single member district, because we had 1.2 million people. So I represented the second largest geography and 1.2 million. And trust me, 1.2 million people in Montana do not necessarily agree on every issue. And so I had to be an all around.
You represented more cows than people.
Yeah.
In Eastern Montana. Yeah. Speaking of agriculture, so you're Republican, mm-hmm. and you've also taken advantage of the farm bills out there, but everyone views the farm bills as being highly Democrat.
Yeah.
Why has Congress, and this relates to a lot of Montanans out there, but why has Congress not passed a new farm bill?
Because of the differences of opinion. Now, you said I took advantage. No, I didn't. I never got a government check from the.
You never got a CRP payment?
No.
You just had voters that reached out to you about CRP payments, but it means a lot to a lot of Montanans.
I have a wheat field on top of the rims, but I don't.
Did you ever collect a hail check off of that?
Nope.
You never had hail?
No.
Okay, because the farm bill is very broad. Uh-huh. Like it helps every farmer and rancher out there, and it's very, it's a big deal for the survival of a lot of family farms out there.
Yeah, but let's talk about the farm bill. I was on agriculture committee in Congress in 2001 when the farm bill had to be passed, but it's not a farm bill. The majority of the money goes to food stamps, which is now called SNAP, because the Democrats aren't stupid. They realize that there's a stigma to collecting food stamps, so they changed the name to SNAP. And nobody really understands or knows what's going on out there. The majority of the money in the farm bill actually goes to non-farmers. But keep in mind that Republicans also take advantage of the Farm Bill because we want them buying our product to ship around the world to help other countries with their poverty. And so uh, we as Republicans, in a way, indirectly want the Farm Bill to pass because we want people to be buying our beef and buying our wheat. And therein lies the rub in Congress. Why don't we have a Farm Bill? Because one side wants more money for SNAP or food stamps, and the other side wants more money directly going to farmers. It's a very complex issue.
It is a complex issue, but farmers and ranchers out there operate their business based on what happens with the farm bill because it impacts trade, it impacts pricing, it impacts your insurance. If you have a hailstorm, if you had a catastrophic event, it impacts your CRP payments if you still are in a CRP program. So, how do farmers and ranchers in Montana plan for what they're doing this next coming year when our elected officials can't get their head out of their butt and pass a farm bill?
Yep.
It,
Well, I was in the cattle business. Uh, there is no farm bill paying for livestock. And so we have a different opinion. But if you have a farm and a ranch, then you're conflicted. And if you're only a farmer, you want things going to that. And so I, as a livestock producer, had to always argue for the farm bill, but against more money going to non-farm issues. Let's call it what it is. It's a social program, and get that away from the farm bill. So you're not arguing, you're not stopping the things from occurring that help Montana producers. And at the same time, they want more money to help people uh, in San Francisco and Portland and Seattle and such. So there's a big difference of the kind of people that are on the agriculture committee that are having to deal with these issues in
right.
Congress.
And I visit with a lot of farmers out there, and they don't have a problem with the SNAP program. They actually like the idea that they're growing a product and they're feeding the American economy. They're being a part of it. And so, yeah, the farmers and ranchers out there are collecting, some subsidies to help grow that stuff, and they have the safeguards so they don't go bankrupt and lose their farmland to the bank. But on the flip side, yeah, you're feeding Americans that need it. So we're keeping the poverty level out because if we took SNAP away, I could see, if we had a larger poverty, would that increase our crime? Would we have malnutrition? So I can see it benefiting America as a whole if we can budget for it. So the question is I can't really see it both sides going away, but should Congress split the farm bill and, like you said, have a farm bill that directly affects agriculture and then have a completely separate program for welfare?
Mhm.
Do you think they should do that, and would they do that?
Well, therein lies the problem. We're talking about the farm bill right now, but that's an expense. So if you shut government down, that's going to affect farmers. And don't lump ranchers. You always say farmers and ranchers. No, if you're purely in the livestock industry, then what you care about is country of origin labeling and things like that. There is no program within the Farm Bill or within the Department of Agriculture that directly affects the livestock industry. So you have to split the issue between farmers and ranchers, or the combination of people that have farms and ranches. But that doesn't solve the issue, because why don't we put more money into education? Well, the more money we put into education, we seem to be dumbing society down. So is it all about money, or is it about local control and getting the federal government out of the education business? But you bring that up, saying we want to eliminate Department of Education. Trust me, there's a lot of Montanans that are going to
Well, I don't think it's eliminating the
that.
Department of Education. It's getting it away from the federal level and giving control to the states, because that way you have Big Brother off the shoulders of the states, and the states can do better at what they're supposed to be doing, is teaching your kids. Where if they're trying to follow federal guidelines, which really I think hurt the schools, was the No Child Left Behind policy. And every teacher across the nation and kids getting pushed through. No, they need to go back. If you can't pass a math test, you don't pass and go to the next grade.
Yeah.
So that's where you need to get rid of the feds, but also get rid of the No Child Left Behind. That's my stance on that. But
Well, and I don't disagree with that, but I tried to make fundamental changes within the Department of Education with Pell Grants, because at the time, Pell Grants, you could get a Pell Grant, the cash money, but never go to class. And it didn't have any kind of a termination. And so you could be on it forever. And you got Section 8 housing, you got food stamps, you got Pell Grants. And when I tried to make changes in Pell, there were websites that were created because Denny Reberg hated college students in Montana because I was trying to make fundamental changes with Pell Grants. And so it's much more complicated than it seems, and you have to trust the people that you elect. And at that time, I was the only statewide office holder that was a Republican. All the rest of them were Democrats. Well, look at where we are now. The pendulum has switched, and all the statewide office holders are Republicans, and we have 2 Republican senators and 2 Republican congressmen. But it's not like that in places like California and Connecticut.
right. So speaking of shifting the pendulum, this last week, or actually when the shares get old, it would have been a week and a half ago. But pharmaceutical drugs coming into America, they're imported. A
Mhm.
lot of the generics are imported. They're coming in from third world countries that we trust. They're repackaged and sold to keep drug prices down.
Yeah.
Well, President Donald Trump comes out and he announces 100% tariff on prescription drugs that are imported. Do you think that's going to come back and bite him because it's going to shift the pendulum back to, I'm not voting Republican, I'm going to vote Democrat because he raised my drug prices?
Well, that's not what he is thinking because he won the presidency. He's in charge right now, and he's a lame duck. And so he's going to do what he's going to do. And we have to
So
either
is his
defend it or
goal
oppose it.
is his goal to shift the manufacturing of the prescription drugs back to America?
Well, one of the problems that,
'Cause
happened when I was in Congress is we had Hillary care, and luckily we didn't pass that but I had that come back and bite me because I said you're going to have rationed health care if you have something like Obamacare because people are going to make a determination that we just don't want to pay for people that don't take care of themselves. So you've got a whole obesity issue, exercise, and all do people do the right thing to make themselves healthy when they hit 62 or 65? Well, not necessarily. And so we're one of the fattest nations in the world because we don't want to have government tell us what we can eat and how much we have to exercise. And we pay the price as taxpayers because the price of health care is going up. So when you talk about that, I knew the guy that invented the um, surgical staple. He was literally put out of business because when Hillary Care was discussed and talked about, all of a sudden his research dollars dried up. So he didn't have the ability to go out and invent new things to keep healthcare costs down. And that's one of the problems we have right now is we're paying for much of the research and development in America that's being taken advantage of in Canada. And we look over at Canada and say, well, why do they have cheaper prices? Well, because we're carrying the load of the research and development.
Right. And so, but we're trying to keep our drug prices down, but here we got Donald Trump raising it 100%. And Denny, I'd love to keep talking to you about it, but we're out of time. So
it always goes very quickly.
It does go very quickly. So my fellow Montanans, thank you, Denny Reberg, for coming in and joining my fellow Montanans. Remember, Montana Farm 406 is your pharmacy and your vaccination destination. We are open 7 days a week. Walk in. Thank you for listening to my fellow Montanans. You can join us every Sunday at 7 p.m. on KGHL or the mighty790.com.